rubber masks in it and shit like that, a lot of rubber at work. Yoga Hosers is like the kind of full moon movie, not good enough to be, I used to say it was like Clueless meets Gremlins, but it's really probably not Gremlins as much as Ghoulies. You know, it just reminds me of, it's a callback to every 80s movie that I grew up watching, 80s horror movie when I first got cable. And then there's one more movie in the trilogy. It's called Moose Jaws, which is just Jaws, but with a moose instead of a shark. And that will bring me full circle in terms of the first movie I ever saw was Jaws. Fell in love with it, been a big Jaws fan. Always referencing Jaws and the stuff that I do. So I was like, oh my God, I'll never get to make a Jaws movie, but it can't stop me from making Moose Jaws. You know, nobody else is going to make it. It's one of the nice things about these 3 movies I've made recently. You never have to worry that there's a competing version somewhere else. Like, oh man, somebody made the Bratzy movie with 1 foot tall Canadian Nazis made a bratwurst. There's a competing version. Fuck. You know, it's like, it's weird original territory, and it turns off a lot of people, but it's kind of fun to be out there, you know, in places where people aren't like, well, this isn't like Batman v Superman, which isn't necessarily a compliment either.
As somebody who has followed your career from Clerks on up through all of your films, um, I like where you're coming from, starting with Red State, Tusk. I'm going to see Yoga Hosers, obviously, but just to go back to Tusk, I went to see that film because it was a Kevin Smith film. I didn't know anything about it, and I was blown away. Well, first of all, I did not recognize Johnny Depp, and
Yeah, he was amazing. That movie is so beyond bizarre. It's so weird. It shouldn't exist. It came off of a podcast, and I was like, let me see if I can turn this dopey story into a film. It was a real like, I think I can. I think I can. Little engine that could kind of story, and it was. I always call it pushing whimsy because I was never like, we're gonna do this by hook or by crook. I was always like, I would love to make this movie about a guy who turns another guy into a walrus. Nobody else is ever gonna make this, man. I would love to see this movie. I guess I'll just have to make it myself. That's how Clerks came into being as well. I just wanted to see Clerks. I didn't want to make it. I just wanted it to exist, and nobody was ever going to make that fucking movie, so I was like, all right, I'll just make it. And then years later with Tusk, it was the same spirit. I was like, we were talking about this thing on a podcast, me and Scott. It shaped into, like, this, you know, on every episode of this podcast, we go on goofy flights of fancy and make up dopey things. This one, I was like, this is viable, man. I'd totally watch that movie. It'd be badass to see a movie reminded me of a movie that like I wanted to see when I was a kid, but didn't. But like influenced by everything I've ever seen and stuff. Like, let me make a creepy Hammer House of Horror film that I would have watched when I first got cable TV in like 1981 or something. So I started putting it together, and it turns into this very bizarre film. But the weirdest thing about it is that Johnny Depp is in it. Like at the end of the day, when you watch it, you're like every minute the movie goes on, you're like, this is very improbable. I can't believe this movie exists. No, they're not going to do this. Holy crap, he did turn him into a walrus. But the weirdest thing, I think, is that Johnny's in it at all. And then Yoga Hosers is like 180 degrees from that, in as much as it plays like you're watching cable and you switched from like Showtime to the movie channel, another competing cable, movie service, premium service. When I first got cable back in the day, and suddenly you're watching another movie where it's, like you felt it before. Like, it's weird. I showed it to like my kids' friends because my daughter's in the movie. She's like playing age appropriate. She's like 16 in the movie, 16 in real life. We showed it to some of her friends, and some of her friends were like, I've never seen a movie like this before. And all I could think of was like, are you kidding me? They made like thousands of these movies in the 80s, but these kids weren't even alive in the 80s and stuff. So the weirdest thing about that movie is that it's a kids movie. Like, it's totally for tween girls. That was the core audience for it. After like a lifetime of bringing my daughter to see like Spider-Man and Batman and Iron Man, it's like never being able to be like, well, here's the girl equivalent and stuff. You can't sit around and bitch it don't exist if you have the ability to make something yourself. So I was like, let me make a movie where two girls are kind of superheroes, man. They fight monsters, and like at the end of the day, they don't give a shit about boys. They just kind of like each other, and I don't know. It just felt fun, and then it came to life. The fact that it came to life with my kid, it wouldn't have happened otherwise if I didn't have a kid at the time or a daughter. Never would have occurred to me. But the movie now occurs to me as the movie I always wanted to see back when I was a 15-year-old girl, but it took for me to be a 45-year-old man to finally make it.
Well, there's also a quote in Tusk that Michael Parks uses: "Do do the things you do when you're drunk, when you're sober, and you'll. It's Ernest Hemingway. Where is that from anyway?
There's a Hemingway quote I found online one day when I was writing Tusk. Like, Tusk is just full of, like, that useless knowledge you pick up across a lifetime, including a lot of web surfing. We're like, oh, that's a great quote, man. Always do sober what you'll do drunk. Always, what was it? Always do sober what you do drunk. It'll keep you from, I forget what the exact quote is.
It'll make you keep your mouth shut or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Beautiful. Well done. It'll teach you to keep your mouth shut.
Well, because
it's such a great, like, wonderful quote that I found online. I was like, let me give it to this guy. And then it opens this weird narrative thread where this lying old man is like, well, I met Hemingway. And you don't know whether he's telling the truth or not based on where the movie winds up going. But it's an enchanting story. Like, what I loved about that movie is that is a real come into my parlor, said the spider to the fly. And Justin's character is a shit and thinks he knows everything and plays people and stuff like that and uses people like this to build himself up. And he meets somebody who's a better storyteller than he is and uses that story to ensnare him. Like, that's what I love about Tusk. And so, I get it. Some people hate Tusk and stuff. I totally get it. You watch it on one level, it's like, this is fucking stupid. What I love about Tusk is it's a movie about the dangers of storytelling. And it's really predicated on Jaws is the first movie I remember seeing as a kid, absolutely loving, falling in love with. My favorite part of a movie that has a giant rubber monster shark in it, which is like, that's fucking porn for a 5-year-old, especially when there was no internet or cable TV. But the thing that captured my imagination most was a scene in which nothing happens, but an old man sits at a table and tells a story. When Robert Shaw tells the USS Indianapolis story, like, there's no flashback. They don't cut to, like, a young Robert Shaw in the water and sharks taking people out. It's literally just a guy telling a story. And even though, like, Jaws is one of the most cinematic, it birthed the cinematic blockbuster, eye candy spectacle at its time, like, it's a movie where its greatest strength is in a moment that Steven Spielberg isn't like, look at what I can do with a camera, look at what I can do with this amazing special effect of a rubber shark jumping on a boat or something like that. It's the same old that we've been experiencing as storytellers and audience since the dawn of time. Somebody telling you something that happened. And the best storytelling, believe me, I love movies. They've made my life. I love watching movies. Civil War, like, blew my hair back. I had such a great time. But, like, at the end of the day, it's not so much, like, you can have, shut up.